There's lots going on, lots to talk about this morning, but there is some lighter stuff as well in the papers, which is quite interesting. And would love to hear your thoughts on that as well, because we do need a little bit of cheering up every now and then on this programme, don't we, when the news is all very heavy. There's a big thing about suits, what you would wear to an interview. Now, it doesn't mention women in this, so presumably as long as you look smart when you go to an interview, you'll be all right.
And what's the argument?
Well, for the gents, they're saying suits are not de rigueur anymore. A lot of people still think a suit is nice for an interview, but some employers saying no, it would go against you if you wore a suit for a job interview.
Surely it depends on the job.
Well,
it's got to. If you're required to wear a suit for work, you should turn up to an interview wearing one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of offices now, though, do this sort of a bit more dressy down, sort of smart casual sort of look. But I would never go for a job interview not in a suit. I don't know, but is that because I'm of an age? I don't know.
I wouldn't say necessarily. I think it just all depends on context. But maybe we have got sort of a slipping of standards.
Maybe.
Should that be encouraged?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do, because Nabila Ramdani is here to talk about the French elections. But being French, Nabila, yeah, I mean, obviously the French have got a huge amount of style and taste.
Indeed, sartorial
style. Sartorial style, absolutely. Should a gentleman wear a suit for a job interview?
I think so. I think so. It gives some sense of gravitas and a bit of charisma and je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. We like that. Well, let us know what you think about this one. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Not that I'm planning on going for a job interview anytime soon, should tell. But if I need to, you never know. What should I wear? What would you wear? Let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's return to Nabila then. Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen from National Rally are in this runoff now, and they got through to the second stage of the presidential elections. We had a good chat about it yesterday, didn't we? They are talking now that this could be as tight as 51% to 49% in favour of Macron. That would be extraordinary.
Well, yes, indeed. But it has to be noted that in the first round already, as expected, Macron has won, but he has won by an extraordinary high score, very close to 28% of the vote. And that compares to his nearest rival, Marine Le Pen, to 23.4%, so close to 24%. Now, as the evening progressed and the votes kept being counted, the left-wing firebrand, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, kept closing the gap to the extent that he ended up with 22.2% of the vote. And this has obviously sent some disappointments among the left in general. Had they been united, they would have gone through easily between the Socialists, the Communists, and indeed the Green. The other far-right candidate who split the vote on the right is Éric Zemmour, who ended up with 7.2%. Now, what the other results shows us mainly is that the main two traditional parties, the Conservatives and indeed the Socialists, have absolutely collapsed, with the Socialists ending with 1.7% of the vote, and the traditional Republican Party, the Gaullist Party, with 4.8% of the vote. Now, that means that because both are under 5%, they will lose the deposit. As far as the campaign is concerned. Now, you don't have to be too sophisticated a pollster to translate all the results, and Mr. Macron's first-round result into what looks like to be a rather convincing victory for him in the second round. But having said that, he still has many enemies, and in his speech last night, he said that nothing was certain. And he certainly called for a wall against the far right. He used that expression, referring to the so-called Republican Pact, where all major political parties and voters unite to ward off extremists and keep them out of power.
We're going to see the campaign shift, aren't we? Because Macron's actually been quite quiet. He hasn't sort of gone full throttle because he's been, effectively busy and worried about international affairs rather than what's happening at home.
Yes, indeed, and that's very much is a criticism that has been levelled at him. He seemed to be far too busy on the phone to Vladimir Putin trying to sort out the war in Ukraine rather than focusing on the day-to-day grievances of ordinary French voters. And some have criticised, actually, his policy in relation to the Ukraine, saying that he, was effectively trying to end the war in Russia's favour. A lot of candidates have been associated with Putin in an unpalatable way. Having said that, meanwhile, Marine Le Pen was on the ground. She was going around and she was addressing pressing issues, talking about the cost of living, the price of fuel, and generally, you know, how to improve the lot of ordinary people.
Is there a sense that people, I mean, I know there's always been a sort of fairly strong support for the National Front and the since National Rally in France. It's always been in the forefront of politics. But is there a sense that people in France are really supporting what she stands for, or are they just disenfranchised and looking for an alternative?
Well, as very often in elections, they very much turn into presidential rejection. So there's a massive vote that is anti-Macron, expressing disappointment in his 5 years so far. We've seen that his presidency has been marked, and indeed marred, by massive protests like the Yellow Vests, for example, who pretty much on the street every Saturday. But, you know, there's a lot of disillusionment in general, and I think that will translate in a higher abstention rate in the second round, which will work in his favour, it has to be said. Having said all that, I think the far-right party of Marine Le Pen is scoring its usual rate, to be fair. And remember that her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was already in the second round of the election. That's back in 2002 against Jacques Chirac. I think, you know, what people don't know much about France and about Marine Le Pen in general is she's not a massive political force in the sense that she has struggled during her political career to even get elected as an MP. She got there barely, just about in 2017, after her fifth attempt and after being rejected a number of times by her northern voters in the north of France. Her party, the National Rally, has only 6 MPs in the National Assembly out of 577 MPs. So this is very much a legacy of mediocrity, and it will be hard to see how could that translate into her eventually getting into the Élysée Palace, frankly.
Okay. Well, look, it's still an interesting few days ahead on this one. Nabila Ramdani, as always, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I lived in France for a couple of years, so I very intimately know the French protest culture and had a lot of weekends scuppered by the Gilets jaunes. So we'll see how that all plays out.
It's interesting. It's quite nice when there's politics going on that don't affect us directly.
That's true, yes.
Be more of an observer with it all.